word why. What a curious word. The kind of word that can make us cringe, feel defensive, or even distant. But you know, sometimes why is the key that can unlock so much to our lives. Join me as we explore the why with fascinating contributors to the world, those that entertain us, inform us, teach us about life, and if we're lucky, inspire the next in all of us. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and welcome to Headroom, a production of Rainlight and co-produced by Old Soul. Let's go. Welcome to a very special episode of Headroom on location in Oslo, Norway, where I got to spend time with some unbelievable innovators and leaders across the sustainability spectrum. As part of Oslo Innovation Week, brought to you by the Oslo Business Region, we are going to go inside the Startup Lab, which is this unbelievably, I think, innovative and inspiring place where startups who have dotted the landscape across the world incubate. And they do so in just a wonderful, the culture there is, it's just something that's very, very powerful. And that's why they have so many people and companies that apply and very few get in because they want the best of the best and they are producing the best of the best. And so today I want to take you on a bit of a ride, if you will. We are going to be speaking with Anna von Zeppelin-Terval. She is the CEO of Völur. And Völur is really fascinating because they are redefining decision-making utilizing AI software for a more optimized and sustainable meat industry. So we're going to put that flag down. And then we're going to be speaking with Leroy Ngani. He's the co-founder of NeedEnergy. And NeedEnergy is helping to support and to rectify the hundreds of millions who do not have sustainable power sources and resources to just live a life that we all maybe take for granted to some degree because we can turn on a light switch, we can turn off a light switch, we can power hospitals and ensure that maternity wards have the power to support a NIC unit. And so I really want to take us around the world a bit, but do so within the confines of this incredible space here in Oslo, Norway, with Anna and Leroy. Let's turn the page on stories that need to be told.
Okay, Anna. So we are here just to set the stage for the audience. Your company, so we're at Oslo Innovation Week. This is Climate Tech Summit here at Startup Lab, which so many of you listening have not, I don't think, had the opportunity to visit Oslo and see this. But as an American, it's like what I think of in the movies, like of a Google space, or what we just think of tech and community and innovation. And so we are here, and you are a part of 40 companies that had an opportunity to present in front of really the ecosystem that is innovation here in Oslo,
yes,
and in front of investors. And I was saying to you, but prior to the interview, that is, when you presented, I wrote a note and said, I want to talk to her and learn more about that company, because there was a way in which you presented, which culturally I think is fascinating, because in America, we're known for sort of having no fear when it comes to sharing how good we might be at something, right? And there's a lot of benefit to that. It's very different culturally here in the Nordics, right? I mean, it's actually, there's Jonteloven here, and you it's not about sharing how good you are in that regard. And so for me, it was very fascinating to watch the presentations thinking, wow, they must all be sweating up there because they're having to be something that they're not accustomed to being. So let's just start with that. Talk about the responsibility that you feel as a CEO of a company in trying to convey a message and a story that has purpose and connects to people.
Yes, thank you. So yes, I'm Anna Terval, the CEO of Völur, and we are indeed based here in Startup Lab here in Oslo. I agree with you. The Nordic ecosystem is very much, that you're getting a level of quality because what actually appears on stage by people pitching is probably only 70% of the true value that a company can deliver or the opportunity set, because there's more of a modest nature here. But for us at Völur, the opportunity exists in a Venn diagram of climate, agriculture, and technology. And we're at the nexus of those three. Climate being how can we do more with less from the meat supply chain. Agriculture being, we play in the meat supply chain and are proud to allow people to continue to eat the food their grandmothers, mothers cooked them, but do it in an optimized way. And then technology, we're using AI and data to help the decision makers as the meat production is happening in these production facilities.
So I'm afraid to ask only for my own, because I want to be able to track. So give me sort of the, I guess, maybe not even 10,000 foot view. I'll let you sort of select. Yeah. What's the best way for me to understand the essence of what the company is doing and the problem it's solving?
Yes. So the problem we're solving is how to feed 10 billion people by 2050. Small problem.
That's kind of a mic drop of a statement there.
And the 10,000 foot view of what we do is we're a software company working with the meat industry, and we optimize how an animal should be cut and sorted to provide the most, in the most rudimentary way, which product the animal should go into. Reducing waste, having no leftovers.
And so, again, from a place of ignorance or just maybe not knowing based on the information that comes my way as a consumer, what is the competitive landscape like? Is this, I mean, are you sort of at a table of one in a world where we think about efficiencies in things that are benign objects in front of us?
Yes.
And maybe we don't when it comes to something that is living and sort of our food supply chain. So are you... How big is the competitive market?
Yeah, if we go backwards, so if you think of, when you eat a hamburger at a fast food chain and then you think, where did my burger come from? If you go, that came on a truck, that truck came from a facility that produced my burger, we're in that facility that produced the burger. We're the technology that's helping to optimize how that burger should be made, so that your emissions profile is reduced from thinking about what carbon emissions came from this, because a lot of people are even unaware that 14% of greenhouse gases are purely from red meat. So
14%.
Yes, 1/4 of global GHG. So global greenhouse gases is from the meat industry.
And so in a world where your company is distributed and ingrained into this industry, how would we see that? What's the difference? What does that look like? How would you envision that? I think you mentioned something that for every 10 cows?
Yes. We now only need 9 for the same amount of output. So we're saying we can, for every 10 cows you would need before, when you implement the Völur software, you only need 9. So what does that mean? How did we get to that? It's because of a day that, the production manager walks into his facility, he says, these are 1,000 cows that are coming in today. What are you going to make? And then on the demand side, it says, these are the products we're going to make. And for him, there's over 7 million decisions of how to cut that carcass.
7 million decisions.
7 million decisions. So linear modeling didn't do this before AI. There was no way, our brains cannot compute this. That's why we need Völur. Because we can then bring in those and the decision, we put the input data in like weight, age, marbling score, yield, so the input metrics of the cattle, and then the demand metrics saying make 10,000 burgers today, 4 steaks, how many sausages, and we allocate what carcass should be made into what product.
And so if we reduce that by 1 cow out of that, then we only need 9. Yes. Extrapolate that out. What's the impact from an emissions perspective?
Yes.
How could we think about that?
So if we could reduce by 10%, that'll give us 1.4% global emissions reductions, which is equivalent to grounding half the world's aviation industry.
This special episode of Headroom, on location in Oslo, Norway, is presented by our friends at Oslo Business Region. Visit oslobusinessregion.no. Oslo welcomes founders, investors, and businesses that are determined to change the world for the better. We also want to thank our friends at the StartUp Lab for hosting the Climate Tech Summit 2030 and introducing us to our new friend and guest of this episode, Anna von Zeppelin-Terval, CEO of Völur, redefining decision-making, AI software for a more optimized and sustainable meat industry. And now, back to our guest.
surrounding half the world's aviation industry.
Yes. If Völur technology could reach all abattoirs, all slaughterhouses, all manufacturing facilities in the meat industry.
So now this may feel like a real severe left turn, but I know you started out at Goldman Sachs years ago. And could you have ever envisioned that, one, you would be in the spot that you are in as a CEO for this company in this industry, but that you would actually, I'll say this, I would imagine that your role as CEO is far more educational than anything, that in essence, you're having to educate consumers, investors, talent that you want to bring on. I mean, right? Am I correct?
Yes.
This feels like it's a new frontier.
Yes.
And maybe it's been laden with people not understanding, or it's personal, isn't it? The relationship we have with our food, we think about that.
Yes.
We can see that in a young child that starts to understand that a hamburger came from something they just saw on a farm.
Yes.
Right? So there's a mental sort of, we all have our own unique, I guess, journey in that. So long way of saying, did you envision that you would become an educator? My words, not yours. Because I would think that's a huge part of what you have to do.
I think the irony sitting in this room with you is you are one of the world's best storytellers, and educating people is actually indeed about storytelling. I agree. So it's bringing people on the journey of food as, the future of food. How are we going to feed 10 billion people? And when you go to eat every day, you're not really thinking about that in the Western world of the luxury we have. But when I sat behind my desk at Goldman Sachs for 10 years, did I think I would be working here today? No. And I think this, I don't know, I talk about linear pathways and non-linear pathways, and I'm more open to opportunities as they come versus sitting down and thinking the next 20 years of my life is going to look like this. It's more, different opportunities that come and knock on your door. And
I would think there's no sort of blueprint for this job. I mean, every day is going to be something new and different. It's not like it's been done before.
Yeah, I think startup life in general, this is now my 4th startup that I've been a part of. It's a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's connecting with people is a big part of it, whether they're investors, the team you work with, the network, the customers. So it's about the connection, I think, with people. And it's also about explaining well what you do and what the company does.
Talk about and I guess educate not just myself, but the audience on what it's like to be a female CEO of a startup. Because I'm wondering if there are commonalities with what we have in the US, where it's less than 4%, I think, of startups that are founded by women get funded.
Yes.
So we have a long way to go
Yes.
to create a balanced and equitable opportunity.
Yes.
And I'm just curious if that's similar here, and what's the impact on you emotionally, personally, and when you think about presenting? Are you presenting where you feel like you have to do twice as well as we might say in the US just to be able to prove a point that you have the same and more capabilities than we do?
I think coming from Australia and then being now in the Nordics and in Norway, Norway is painted as this amazing country of gender equality, board positions with a quota, electric vehicles driving around, which I would say is true to all of the above. But feeling kind of that difference between Australia, traveling a lot to the US, being here in the Nordics, I definitely feel that the gender equality piece here is very much much more of a level playing field than some other places I've lived and worked. And I feel we're getting there. But for me personally, I just get out and do my thing without that's not in my mind when I'm getting
Now, would that have been, I know this is the 4th startup you said.
Yes.
So would you have the same, I guess, perspective from when you were in your first? Or have you built up enough sort of calcification?
Yeah, I just roll with the punches, I think, is kind of more or less the hard yakka style. And, it's interesting because I thought being in a boardroom back at my days at Goldman's in oil and gas, that was definitely gender biased. But now I go to meat manufacturing facilities and I probably feel like I've gone even more backwards in time. So,
are you like the only female in the room often?
Definitely. It's a very male-dominated industry, I think, particularly because of like it is quite a, it's a hard industry to be in. It's very physical in some respects. So I think that's.
So what's the lead time, Anna? I don't know why I'm using that phrase, but it's just like the lead time, and when you're developing a relationship with someone in the meat industry, let's say in America.
Yes.
Do you know going in, you're going to need 20 minutes a day or whatever it is for them to get past the fact that they are now working with a female CEO who's not going to take any
BS
or any BS. I would just imagine, and maybe this is coming from Hollywood with so many examples of real life stories where women have had to this lead time before the business can actually be done.
Yeah.
Is that real? Is that something that you have to think about consciously?
I think it's about team. I definitely, when I have particularly investor meetings, when I have particular meetings and, KYC, know your customers well. So before we have meetings with particular customers, I'll evaluate who's on their management team, who are we meeting, what do we need from our side, what aligns. And more often than not, from a perspective of opportunity and being the best position we can be, I'll bring some of the team that might be different age, different gender, different style, so that we're matching well. Because I don't think going in blind works.
I mean, it can, right? But then
no, I definitely need to be strategic on how we front up, for sure.
So we'll put a wrap on this phase of our conversation. When you were sitting there, so when you were done pitching and presenting to all of these influential people, I'm calling influential just within the ecosystem here, in Oslo, tell me the change or the shift in your own mindset when you then become an observer to other founders, other CEOs that are pitching. Are you finding points of connection that make you feel more part of a community? Because we talk a lot about CEOs of startups, that's a very lonely position.
Yes.
So what's the mindset when you're off stage and you're watching your contemporaries, and they're not your competitors, they're in different areas or sectors, but what is that like to be able to watch them after you've just been up there?
Yeah, I would say that I feel compassion because I know how hard it is to get up there and explain your story and bring people on the journey. But I also think that culturally, you see when you go to the US, there's like big, bold ideas and big, bold action. And here the voices are just a little bit quieter, a little bit, trying to get there. So I think there's some momentum to be gained, but I also feel that I know there's high quality here. It's just a lot of hard skills that could be rounded out with some more soft skill interpretation and kind of sales awareness.
Yeah. I'm going to walk away with it. It's the cultural impact, I think, is fascinating. I think it's a wonderful lesson. I would imagine if it was an audience full of Americans watching the presentations, there's so much to learn, and vice versa. But it's very powerful when we get out of our own comfort zones and present our ideas and what we stand behind. And you did so quite eloquently and very professionally. And there's no doubt that you garnered a lot of attention for the company. And so I hope this is the first of many conversations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Anna. And I think what they're doing is really fascinating. And it really is, I think, compelling when you think about technology and the way it can impact us in the areas of our lives that we would never think. But when we actually sit down, why would we be surprised that AI and technology will have an impact and is having an impact on every facet of our lives? But we're going to take a little bit of a trip. Maybe not literally. Sure, we're here in Oslo for Oslo Innovation Week, brought to you by Oslo Business Region, and we are within the ecosystem, this incredible innovative space called StartUp Lab in the heart of Oslo for Climate Tech Summit 2030. But we are going to, for this next discussion, go from Oslo to Zimbabwe and across the African continent, and then back to Oslo. And we're going to be interviewing and spending time with Leroy Ngani. He is the co-founder of NeedEnergy. And I will tell you, this had a personal connection for me, because the very first time I went to Senegal, I got to travel within remote regions across the country. And I started to have a better understanding of the impact power and energy has on our very survival, not just our way of life and whether we can, I guess, read a book by lamplight, but can we survive? Can we support healthcare systems that need to have constant flow of energy and access to energy? And it's really important. And it's something that impacts maternal health and that of newborns and so many different areas of our lives. And NeedEnergy is doing some incredible work. And according to NeedEnergy, there are over 800 million people that do not have access to electricity, with over 600 million residing in sub-Saharan Africa. NeedEnergy is an energy tech startup that is leveraging modern-day science techniques to encourage the uptake of solar PV systems and clean energy in sub-Saharan Africa and beyond. And so it's another way, it's another incredible innovator and group of innovators like Anna and her team that are using data intelligence to provide smart solutions. And NeedEnergy, that would be clean energy solutions. So come with me from wherever you are on planet Earth. Spend some time in Oslo, then travel with me and Leroy to Zimbabwe and back again. Enjoy.
Leroy, I know, just to set the stage for the audience, we are here in Oslo at Startup Lab at Climate Tech Summit 2030. And I got to say this out front. Selfishly, I saw you pitch. NeedEnergy is your company.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And I immediately was sort of transported to your roots in Africa. And for the audience that knows, I've been so blessed to be able to spend quite some time in Africa over the last number of years. And it's just has held such a place for me. And I think it grounds people in trying to understand the impact that we have as humans on our environment, on our fellow humans and community members. You showed a picture to start your presentation, your pitch. Right. Can you describe again? Let's. I want to because it was just such I loved it. It was a novel way to do it, but it was so great.
Yeah. So that picture was taken around 1998. I was in rural Zimbabwe. That's where I grew up. That was with me and my grandmom. I'm sure she was visible. That was the star of the show. So yes, I grew up in rural Zimbabwe. I moved to the city when I was just 13 years old for high school. So for me, it was my first time seeing electricity.
Okay, I want to make sure we're clear on this. So your first time seeing electricity, you were 13 or 14 years old?
Yeah, 13 years old, yes, to be precise, yeah.
So what does it mean to see electricity? Because I love that phrase. I think it's important for people.
It's exciting, right? A quote by Halen just past week. I hope
a quote from Elon. Okay, it could get dicey, Elon. But we'll go ahead.
So this is quite a fair quote. It was like, science and magic may sometimes look or feel the same, when it's done well. So for me, being able to see the lights or watching TV, that felt like magic, vividly in your mind. You always want to be in front of the TV, read under the lights, and you transition from a place where even if you want to read at night, it's for 15 marks under the candlelight. Then all of a sudden you have about access to 6 to 10 hours of light time under electricity bulbs to read your books or watch TV, which was the reason why I was in the city, right? Because I did well educational-wise.
So you were a good student.
Yeah, I was a good student. Still to this day, I do. So it felt like magic, the experience, though there are disappointments. That's the reason why I'm here today. But yeah, I kind of make that quote by Elon to relate with how I felt the first time I saw electricity.
I think it's a very vivid way to paint that experience. And I will say, in my own ignorance, when I have spent time in remote regions of Africa, it did make me think many times over about what we take for granted and our love affair with what we might think of as the power grid. And what happens? Here's what's interesting, Leroy. I don't know if people understand me, but maybe you will. When I'm in Africa and I'm having those experiences where there is no electricity, I have a different relationship with time.
Yep.
Time feels very different to me. And not in a way where it's slow and maybe, you're bored or you're not interested, it's like I have a different relationship. Like in the West, everything is, we're racing, right? Time is like an enemy in that regard.
Yeah.
So how do you think about time and energy? Do they relate at all? Does that make sense what I'm saying? That experience of a day is different.
Yeah. I mean, without energy or power, things feel slow. And the magnitude gets bigger over time. I'm sure people really don't realize. I'm also a fanatic of physics. Actually, it's not Elon's quote. He was also quoting some guy called Arthur C. Clarke. He's a renowned author when it comes to sci-fi stuff. So I also am a huge believer in engineering, type 1 civilization. Over time, as Africans spend a lot of time without access to power, we get left behind, right? That's when you go back to Africa. You feel like this place feels 30 years away from where I'm coming from, right?
Yeah.
It's that lack of progress by the civilization around the place, which is Africa. But it's not their fault. It's not my fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's that lack of basic needs like great healthcare, great water systems, for hygienic stuff, and also access to power, right? So for sure, you're right. It feels like time may sometimes stand still, but also we joke around about it that there's no hurry in Africa. We always
there's no hour in Africa.
Yeah, there's no hour in Africa. We have more time to change stuff.
The only way I can say I absolutely agree with you. There's no every time I've gone and they've told me something like it's a 4-hour drive.
Right.
No, double it. It's an 8-hour drive.
Yes, for sure. I mean,
because there's no hour.
There's the infrastructure also, but yeah, it also presents a good opportunity to do something about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's transition to that. So we talked off air that I've seen firsthand when power cuts off, something we can't fathom here in Oslo or in the US where I'm from. There are life and death scenarios that play out when we cut off power intermittently.
Yes.
It's a massive problem across the continent. How do we bridge that? You felt that magic when you were 13, right? The experience of energy to, I'm going to move to Oslo. I'm going to start a company to basically correct
that. Yeah.
How did you get from there to here in your mind? I know you were, and that we're even sitting here in Oslo.
Yeah. So it was a real problem for me. Also, like when I was in university, I've been an entrepreneur, right? So I was selling lunch hour meals, in the baker stand, not like Burger King like here, but I think I could compete. So every time, we would try to do our business, power runs out. Usually in some cases, it was gas related. That affected the business, that affected everything. So as a business person and from a guy who was doing some engineering, I thought probably let's do something about it. So that need to do or to change my situation is what led me to this moment, being in Oslo and being in a place where you have resources, you have a network and a support system that can allow you to do something about a very bad situation.
How much, Leroy, of the process of building NeedEnergy is in educating others about the needs,
right,
and the potential challenges that they might be different if you were starting from here, like if you were here, right, trying to solve, let's say, power outages and power cuts in that regard. Like how much education has to go into the business plan?
Yeah, I mean, the education is quite broad in the sense that there are new technologies, right? Like I always say this, if we're going to catch up with the first world, one of those light bulb moments for someone in Africa is the current energy transition, right? So if we are going to be able to give power access to over 600 million people in, let's say, 40 years, which is the current deficit in Africa, that allows us to get here. So that has always been my point, to say, to get to a certain level, you need some level of resources, you need some level of education that is involved for people to understand the technology. Also, you're going back to an African setup which is quite rigid, right? Like we operate in the grid, we operate with the utility, right? The utility needs to understand, is your technology good enough to work with our systems, with this little precious infrastructure that we have? So you need to do a lot of education with them because they are stakeholders. Also, the people you need to give the education to the people to say this is better technology than burning firewood, than using charcoal to cook, which could be dangerous from a health level before we can even get to a technology level. So there's a lot of education that goes into it, to an extent that our marketing is educationally based, right?
Your marketing is educationally based. Has to be, right?
We write white papers, we are going into blogs, trying to teach people, not necessarily trying to sell our product, as the end goal, but giving people as enough knowledge as possible to say this is the right way. We should definitely be looking into and growing. Yeah.
There's an assumption in the West that in essence, if I can see an issue, then my neighbor should be able to see there's an issue or a problem.
Right.
But I think sometimes that's the barrier when people who are not from the continent want to engage and do work in the continent. How much of it is that, to your point, you were 13 years old, you hadn't experienced electricity. But if I'd met you when you were 11, you may not have told me the one thing in your life you're missing is electricity.
Right. Yeah.
But yet, if I came with my own bias, I might think that. Is that part of the education, even on the continent, to be able to, in essence, show them the possibility in a world where your company, NeedEnergy, has the ability to deploy your technology?
Yes. I think your point goes all the way to, like I was saying, founders are very patient, especially when you're fundraising. So it has come to me, or to my understanding, that that education is not only for the market where we are trying to solve the product, or for the stakeholders, for the people where we are looking for resources from the high talent, incredible talent that we intend to hire, to let them understand, firstly, the market and the opportunity in Africa, but also the impact on how it would impact Africa going forward. And a basic understanding that, yes, we are doing good, but also there's an opportunity to make sustainable profits going forward. So if I got that correctly, really, so there is that level of education that stems from just the person who's buying or who's being impacted by this, to the people who have the resources to help us, get the technology down the way it is needed, right? So there's a lot of teaching people about the African market, how things happen in Africa, the humility to understand the needs in Africa, because sometimes you may not have that humility, but if you don't, you get things wrong. That's how it would turn out.
It's such an important point. When I was recently in Tanzania, there was a dam that had been built.
Right.
And there's a water filtration center right next to it. And when I was there were grandmothers that they take care of the filter center and the dam.
Yes.
It's like a family member. But the district commissioner told me it wasn't until they had the buy-in, the belief of the locals, that they were able to get all the things done that they needed to for it to be successful. And so now it's a point of pride that these women, their job is to basically take care of and nurture this resource that is supporting 6,000 local people with clean water. It's just such an important point. And we talk about balance sheets and where you're forecasting your revenue, but if you don't have the belief of the people that it will benefit.
I mean, Africa is a community-centric continent, period. People work in communities. There's real support. We even have this saying that, it takes a village to raise a kid, right? So, which I feel is what's happening to me, like how we got here. A lot of people have done a lot of great stuff on our behalf for us to get here. So, if you give people in Africa and show them that this thing is yours. It's there to benefit you. It's there to impact you. It's there to get your lives better from point 0 to 1. You will see the power of like our DNA.
Your DNA,
of being a community-centric kind of continent, for sure.
Leroy, my last question, because I want to make sure you talk to all the people you need to, so you you get the support here of the Startup Lab and the community here in Oslo. Do you mind sharing or reflecting on any sense of responsibility you feel for your home country in the work that you're doing? Because I would hope that people celebrate the commitment that you're making, that you have moved to Oslo to achieve this dream. That this is much more than just building a company. That's my hunch, my guess, and even spending the brief time that we've spent together, that this is much more than just an exit in the future and saying that you're a successful entrepreneur. Though I know that that's part of your DNA. But what sense of responsibility do you feel? And does it grow over time the more people know about NeedEnergy?
Yeah, so like I said, in Africa today, there are over 600 million people without access to power. And for me, it's not just a state, right? It's not just statistic. I lived that.
You lived it.
Yeah, till I was 13, right? So initially as a company, we are really solving to minimize power cuts in these urban grids. But the whole idea or the whole drive is to, sometime in the future, go back to that kid who used to be me, and give them access to energy and power so that they can read under the lights. They can feel that magic from birth. You don't need 13 years for you to feel what I felt. It's unfortunate, it happens, but if I could get it to 24 hours after being born, I would have lived life on earth for sure. So also our principle is solve for humanity. There's always this thing to say, African problems by Africans. But I think the simplicity in doing anything is to solve for humanity, right? It doesn't matter if you are in the deepest corner of Asia or America or Africa. If you don't have power, if there's someone who's willing to solve for your problems, that will change quite a lot of people, right? So if you solve for humanity, I think you get far, which is the principle in us. If you solve for humanity, Africa gets to benefit out of it.
Thanks for taking the plunge into Headroom, where we uncover the why behind the what and who impacting our lives. Headroom is a production of Rainlight and co-produced by our friends at Old Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and this is Headroom.